DogWorks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can hear all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on social media by searching DogWorks Radio. And today we have three guests on. They're calling in from Wisconsin. They are from Otter Run Sled Dog Kennel, and we have Martha, Aaron, and Chad Schuweiler. Martha, good afternoon for joining us today. Can you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you're all about, please?
Hi, my name is Martha, and I am the mom of Chad, and Erin is my daughter-in-law, who we'll be talking in a minute. I got into dog mushing. My first interest in dog mushing was 1972. I took a trip to Alaska with my mom and dad, and we got to see sled dogs at Denali, and I was smitten a little bit by that and brought a dog home with me from North Pole, Alaska, and then managed to have them for a little while, and actually chose my college. University of Wisconsin River Falls had a class. They said it was about dog sledding, but in reality the instructor of this outdoor class had a sled dog team, so he invited us all, and we got to watch him hook up the dogs, and I was even more smitten at that point, and I got to bring a couple of my dogs down, and he let me use his lead dogs, but it was kind of over. It didn't last real long, and I didn't really learn much about dog mushing. But 30 years after that, which was probably about 18 years ago, my son and I ended up helping a man in Tomahawk who had a lot of dogs, and he invited us to. I was ski juring at the time and was commenting how I needed maybe more dogs. And he said, "Come on out." And the next thing you knew, Chad and I were both on board. And that was, we haven't been without dogs since then.
Aaron, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Erin Schuweiler. I got started mushing, how old am I now? Almost 20 years ago when I was 9. So mine is a little different. My grandpa Mick, he has every National Geographic article ever printed, and we used to sit and eat Oreos and read articles, and one of them happened to be about Susan Butcher and the Iditarod, and pretty much the minute after I read that article, I was telling my mom and dad that I need sled dogs. I'm going to run the Iditarod. I need a husky puppy right now. Well, they believed me about as well as any parent of a 9-year-old, so I had to beg and save my allowance for about a year before they took me to a kennel in Minnesota, and I got to bring home my first 2 sled dogs.
And Chad, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Chad. I am Martha's son, and we kind of got into it together. Like she briefly mentioned, there was a gentleman in Tomahawk who was an Iditarod finisher, and he had he was quite busy with work, and he had 50 dogs and not enough time to run them all and get them to races and so on. And so I was in my early 20s, kind of aimlessly going through life, not knowing what to do, going to college, and doing well in college and that. But so sled dogs came in my life, and I pretty much dropped everything and said, this is what I want to do. And it turned out that was accurate. And ever since, just immersed myself. Never did finish college, and no regrets on that. Got started with a good company with work, and that's worked well with dog mushing. And definitely no regrets.
Well, again, thank you for joining us today. This is definitely a family affair, and it's going to be fun talking to you. You guys are located sort of in the lower 48 hotbed of dog mushing, and when we think of that, we think about the John Bear Grease and a whole bunch of other mid-distance and sprint races around that area. If we could start with Martha, please. When did you guys start racing, and when did you guys set your sights on as a kennel to run bigger and more well-known races?
Well, when we started, Chad and I both started racing at the same time with another kennel's dogs, and we did quite a few races then, and we also did do the John Bear Grease mid then, but we didn't. We just and Chad did the John Bear Grease marathon. That would have been in 2003. We started in 2002, but then our race season, that was 2003. And our first race ever was the Empire race in Solon Springs, Wisconsin. And the dogs a lot of the dogs were maybe 3 when we started, so they were just prime. And I remember going to that race and not having a clue on how to pass or what to do, and they said there was a head-on, and I remember asking, for some advice from some of the people, and they just kind of gave us this strange look, and it turns out that the dogs were really good, and we ended up placing quite well at that race. But on our way home, we stopped at a gas station, and I got out of that car, and I couldn't even walk. And both of us were so sore from 2 days of dog racing. And the funny thing is that really has never happened again. It was just like that first dose of what dog racing was, and we were running up the hills, and it was. I just think back how funny that was. So it's good exercise.
And Chad, your mom had mentioned that you had ran the Bear Grease, I believe she said, in 2003. That race is really getting a heck of a lot of press, especially this year with the new Q-Paws race concept that's happening with that race, the Finnmark and the Iditarod, and one race in Russia. How many times have you ran the race, and what's your best recollection of how you've done or place that you've done?
In the last 10 years or more, I've kind of taken a back seat to racing, and Mom and now Aaron are doing the racing, and that's just fine with me. So Mom has won the Bear Grease mid-distance 4 times, and Erin's won it now. She's a recent champion this year. I ran the marathon 2 times, and I want to say I finished maybe 8th place is my best finish. That was a little unique year. It was like 5 or 6 days after the UP 200, and myself and another musher were the only ones to do both the UP 200 and marathon, and I was the only one to finish that year. So it wasn't a team prime, but nevertheless finished it. I think maybe like 8th place. The whole Q-Paws thing is, I guess we're all learning maybe what it's about as we go. We don't know a lot about it. So far, the coverage seems to be exciting, and hopefully the more we learn, the more we find out how it'll be a benefit for the sport and for the John Bear Grease.
Aaron, the reason I'd reached out to you is from your win here very recently. Can you tell us about that, and what are your racing accomplishments over the last few years?
Oh, boy. Well, as far as the race last weekend, I feel fortunate that I got to run an incredible team of athletes. Chad and Martha they really have the Bear Grease Mid dialed in as far as training, and we have a team pretty primed for it. But we just had a really good race. Luck was on our side. We ran well all three legs, and everyone stayed really healthy, and they were just really raring to go. So it was a fun ride for me, a very fun ride. I have done the Bear Grease Mid 4 times now. My first time running it was 2005. At the time, there was no junior class, so I was the youngest person to ever finish the 120 or however many miles it was then race. So I've done it 4 times since then. And then I've done just about all of the Midwest mid-distance races pretty much since I was 10. So, yeah.
So you've been doing this for quite a while, and if I could stick with you, Aaron, for just a second, I believe at the start you said that you started mushing when you were 9 years old, and now here you are in a mushing family with Martha and Chad. Did that happen by circumstance? Did you guys meet through mushing, or did you guys know each other from school, or what?
Oh, we definitely met through mushing. Funny enough, once we actually started talking and hanging out, we realized races we'd been at and didn't even know we were at the same race. My first race was one of their first races, the Empire 130, and never would have known we were at the same race until we started talking years later. But mushing definitely brought Chad and I together.
So earlier you learned about First Paw Coffee Company, and now I'm going to tell you about its Tail Wagger Blend. First Paw Coffee Company's Tail Wagger Blend is their first offering, and its name and label were crowdsourced from their Facebook fans. How cool is that? The Tail Wagger Blend is a private label premium blend that was developed just for them. It is a medium roast from Colombian beans with tastes of Brazil nuts, grapefruit, and oak. Be sure to go to ak.dog/free and enter to win a bunch of cool prizes. That's ak.dog/free.
Martha, if we could go back to you, we're sort of jumping around a little bit in terms of history. You had said that you started back in 1972, so almost 50 years ago now was when you first were introduced to sled dogs, and I know a heck of a lot's changed over that time. And if we could, how do you think the sport has changed? And in particular, we were just talking about the Q-Paws and all of that hype that it's bringing to mushing. What do you think about the sort of progression of the sport over the last half century or so?
Well, in the 70s, I wasn't really involved in a racing mode. The instructor that I spoke about, he was involved with the Wisconsin Trailblazers, and basically he had a team of big fluffy huskies, and he was a wrestling coach at River Falls, and he talked about how dogs were so wonderful to work with when he got done with his real job. But so the exposure for racing for me back then really is non-existent. But the mushing, when we started in even 2003, I would say that there's been lots of changes with, at least in our mental set as far as the types of dogs that we've, and the types of training and the nutrition and, somewhat the sleds. There's just a little bit more that we're just thinking a lot about it a lot more, and we've learned so much over the last almost 20 years now. Chad might be able to answer that. It'd be interesting what Chad's take on that would be, that same question.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going with that. Chad, Aaron had mentioned that you guys are pretty dialed in terms of races around your area, and in particular the Bear Grease Mid. And you guys pride yourself on really progressive dog care and the way you do things at your kennel, and especially the way that you talk about your kennel and how you do things on Twitter in particular. Can you share a little bit about that? First off, what it means to be dialed in, because a lot of folks that are listening are not mushers. They're just mushing fans or pet owners. And then secondly, can you talk a little bit about your kennel setup and how you guys do things a little bit different than a lot of other folks?
Well, I think a lot of maybe the progressive aspect is, how we view things in training, and I'm not criticizing anybody else. I mean, I certainly respect people that have their soldier army dogs that are perfectly behaved, and but we view them probably a little bit more as like artists, and we respect their individuality maybe a little bit more, and their personality, and if they have a quirk, we're not trying to necessarily fix every quirk, and just let them maybe be a little bit more who they are. And then as far as training, we're pretty unorthodox probably. We're not sitting with the GPS making sure we did that run in under 3 hours, or it's lots of stopping, lots of happy breaks. Really not generally worried about how fast we're going, or it's basically more or less based around the dog's attitude, more than miles or miles per hour. So I think we're a little bit unique in that sense.
And it obviously is working with Aaron's recent win this past weekend with the Bear Grease Mid. Aaron, if we could jump back to you, let's talk a little bit about your dogs and maybe the dogs that you ran with in particular when winning this race. Where do the dogs come from in terms of lines? And then maybe tell us about one or two of them, please.
Bloodlines, Chad will be the better answer, but so my two leaders, Flossie and Joan, they led all 3 legs, and they led all 3 legs for Martha last year. Those 2 girls are just rock stars out front. I mean, head-on passing at Gunflint, passing snowmobiles at Bear Grease. They're 2 exceptional ladies. Flossie's brother, Dodo, he ran swing for me the whole time. They're just a really fun, very boisterous group. As far as bloodlines, Chad's probably a little bit more versed.
So, that's another little bit unique thing. This is Chad again. Probably can tell by the voice. But when we first got started with our own kennel, I got some open class dogs because I figured the faster a dog you get, you're not gonna get beat in these races with open class dogs. We'll be way faster, and I think there are some good dogs. But in 2009 or 10, I decided to start a little different direction and go with more distance lines. And there was one dog in particular when Jason Barron sold out, a dog named Clash, who was heavy Jeff King lines, and she was kind of a foundation in getting us in the more competitive direction. And Clash herself she led, I think, 3 of our Bear Grease Mid championships and Copper Dog, and then her pups, the dogs that Aaron mentioned, are directly out of Clash, and so we bred her a few different times to a few different males, and we got lots of leaders out of her. And really, she was the main driving force in not only a genetic direction but also a strong front end.
If we could go back to Martha Martha, how are you still involved with the mushing with your family? Do you still partake in some smaller races, or are you the cheerleading mom? What are you exactly?
No, I'll still be on the runners. We have a race coming up next weekend, the Minnetonka Klondike race, and I'll be on the runners for the Copper Dog. So I'm still as willing as ever as I have been to be on the runners. But basically, we are now splitting it. We're between Aaron and I. We're splitting the races.
And that was my next question. How do you guys choose who runs what? Is it something that you guys sit down? And the reason I ask this is because Chad had said that you guys are a little bit unorthodox, meaning that you just sort of see how it goes, and obviously that works very well for you. Do you guys sit down in October or whenever and think, okay, Aaron's going to run this and Martha's going to run that, or what?
Well, I think we were going to divide up. Generally, our two, over the past at least 6 years, our two focus races is the John Bear Grease Mid and the Copper Dog 150. And so we're going to divide those up. Aaron gets one, Martha gets the other. And Martha's the defending Copper Dog champion, so we figured she should defend her title. And that's basically how it. And then we just divided the other ones. I don't even remember how, but the Gunfoot Mail Run Aaron ran. She had never run it, so that was part of it. And then the Minnetonka race is an inaugural race, but it seems like it's this great big giant event. So Martha had never run that one, so I guess that's basically how it unfolded. And I think going forward, it'll probably be Martha and Aaron running either the Bear Grease or the Copper Dog. They'll split those two up.
And you'd mentioned the new Minnetonka race, and that was sort of my next line of questioning there. And this is for any of you guys that would like to answer. We had talked a lot about how mushing is changing over the years, and it seems, especially up here in Alaska, more and more races are getting canceled because of climate change, or, for example, in the Yukon Quest that just started yesterday, there's only 15 mushers in it this year, so a very small field. Where do you guys see it changing over the years, and in particular now that there's, like you said, a lot of hype over this new mid-distance race right there in Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly saw, when we first got started in mushing, some of the races that we attended, Midnight Run, which is the 8-dog race, the UP 200 would see close to 50 teams, and the UP 200 itself would be 25 teams. And the one race, though, that really never saw a drastic drop was the Bear Grease Mid. We often refer to it as the most participated race in the lower 48. And, I mean, climate change, whatever, but the recession in 2008 was a huge, huge hit. Or 2007, 2008, that really took a toll on participation. But the beauty of the 8-dog mid-distance circuit, which is really popular and competitive in the Midwest, is you don't need a 50-dog kennel or a 40-dog kennel. It's popular among 14-dog kennels and 20-dog kennels, and so during that recession. Yeah, we saw a drop in our numbers, but not nearly the drop that 14-dog races and open class races and that sort of thing took. And we're huge proponents of this style racing, and honestly, we would never consider moving to, like, say, Alaska, because they don't have this really nice circuit here with large participation, competitive teams, beginner teams, and really nice purses here too. So it's been good for the climate we're in, whether it's literal climate or economic climate.
Martha, one last question to you, and that Chad had just mentioned that there's a heck of a lot of participation, in particular on this 8-dog circuit, and there's a lot of talk about it, of course, in the sled dog circles. What do you think about from a fan's perspective? How does that does the racing in the lower 48 pan out for a group of fans? And this is going to lead in right to social media that I'm going to address with Aaron. What do you think about the fans' perspective, Martha?
Well, I think that has probably changed because of trackers and just in general good PR. You know, races that don't have any PR or don't have any social media presence are probably not going to do as well. I mean, we that was probably halfway into our mushing racing where things really started to change, and it seemed that the fan base has changed, and those start lines at the midnight run, UP 200 probably always had great fan base at the start, but that Copper Dog and the Bear Grease and the UP 200, it's phenomenal. Those starts it brings in the fans, and then they're probably going home and going on the internet, and that's where Aaron can take over with social media.
Yeah, there's nothing like seeing that group of fans, especially with those bigger races that you talked about, the UP 200 and the Bear Grease, and just the amount of support that comes out, and especially there in Duluth around the Bear Grease time. I mean, there's just so much going on with all of the events that lead up to it and whatnot, which brings me to Aaron. I know that you guys are very active on social media, on Twitter in particular, and you have started something that a few kennels have started, a Patreon page, which is a great way to keep fans involved and to really be a part of the team. Can you talk a little bit about your guys' social media strategy and how you use it to promote your guys' kennel and what you do and how you do it, et cetera?
I mean, I don't know that we really have a strategy. It just kind of organically grew as a way to share just our dogs and how we interact with them. And then as far as Patreon, that just kind of grew out of people wanting another way to help support the kennel. So we just kind of offer more of an inside scoop to people. But yeah, I mean, social media is huge for positive publicity for the sport. It's the easiest way to kind of show people.
We definitely would have never gotten into Twitter without Q and Blair, and I mean, they're phenomenal there. And what we knew was missing in a sport is you can follow a sled dog race, and you might not know a dog's name until a golden harness is awarded, and it's still an issue. I mean, the dogs need to be more. I mean, Frank Moe had a dog in the Bear Grease that was got lots of publicity because he was blind, and that's great. These stories about the dogs, maybe a dog that had parvo as a puppy, or, there's not enough focus on the dogs, and I think while the mushers care and love for their dogs, that in the media sense, the dogs themselves is what's going to propel the sport, and like Blair is brilliant at focusing on the dogs and getting people that would not gravitate to the sport, but they see these great dog stories, these great dog photos, and it's really the way to expand the sport. I mean, quite frankly, focusing on mushers and mushers' egos is not going to be the way to propel the sport to the masses. The masses want to hear about your dogs and the wonderful stories and the dog that maybe is the underdog that made it on the team, and those type of stories are huge.
They are, and that was exactly what I was going to say. I think we need a heck of a lot more publicity about the dogs, and that's one of the reasons that we do this show. Of course, we can talk about the musher stories because that's who people know, but I always ask those questions about tell us about your dogs, your lines, etc. One last question, guys. Any of you guys can chime in here, and it's again related to that social media. Chad, you had talked about Blair Braverman and her husband Quince Mountain, and they are absolutely phenomenal on Twitter. They they and their cadre of ugly dogs have really taken over the platform. What do you guys think? Why do you think that Twitter is such a great platform for mushing? It seems that it would be Facebook or YouTube, something a little bit more, sit down in front of the computer and really engage on. But Twitter, I would imagine most of it's just right there on your phone.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think before we joined Twitter, we were taking lots of photos of our dogs, and so it's just natural. I mean, you share it. I think maybe there are more retweets than there are shares on Facebook. So maybe there's a little bit more spreading the word, so to speak. Facebook can get clicky, and whereas Twitter, I don't think there's this clickiness. People are sharing stuff. I mean, you never know what's going to be like a hit, so to speak. But I think it just spreads, the tweet spread more than Facebook post spread, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with you. Guys, we are just about out of time. Today we're talking to Martha, Aaron, and Chad Schuweiler. They're calling in from Wisconsin. They are heavily involved with the dog racing circuit, dog sled racing circuit in the Midwest. How can folks find you guys? We talked about Patreon and Twitter and whatnot. Can you drop us a handle or two, and we'll definitely include it in the show notes?
Our Twitter handle is Otter Kennel.
Very good, guys. Thanks for joining us. And on behalf of my guest today, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From DogWorks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for DogWorks Radio. Did you know that Alaska DogWorks trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska DogWorks on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.